So after parting it off there on the lathe, I flipped it around the other way, put it back in the chuck. Now obviously this isn't gonna get me a tall circular concentricity with the edge of the flange, but what I was able to do, what I definitely needed to do, is I needed to make sure that I was running square endways on the end of it, because I then faced back across it with a normal lathe cutter. I then of course deburred it a little bit extra, put some nice chamfers on it, pulled it out of the lathe, and then got really terrified. How on earth was I going to mount this round thing in the mill, and how on earth am I going to transfer the marks and get accurate hole locations for the next step? Because of course, no holes? Holes. I think I have the solution for the mounting, which is a 5C collet block. I have a collet in the bottom here, and I have cranked on this thing and tightened it, which means that we have the flat surface of the back of the collet block. This can get mounted in the vise. I can use parallels across the bottom, since there is a little protrusion here with the collet, but we can square this up and get this thing to be flat, and it means that we should have a pretty solid mount for this in the mill. I'm so pleased I thought of that, otherwise I would have been scratching my head forever, and I don't know how I would have done it. Wait a minute, mounting it's one thing, I still need to transfer the holes, and I still don't know how I'm gonna do that. So how am I gonna mark this out? I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna super glue these two pieces together, and then I will transfer punch in from the rear, or through this, onto here with a center punch, so that we can then drill in the center punch holes. What is this contraption that you have set up here, Alec? Well, this is an angle plate, this is a V-block, and this is a plastic clamp that appears to be bending, but feels pretty solid, doesn't seem to be going anywhere. It feels pretty square, you know, fingers crossed it's staying square, and I want this because now I have three references to butt up against with my pieces: the granite, the side, and the V-block. I'll be able to butt up against them and hold it down tight all together while the super glue sets. Then hopefully we're going to be completely lined up in as much a way as I can with super glue. Good old super glue. So there's one super glue dot. There's another super glue dot, and there's a third super glue dot. What I'm going to do, I'm going to try and spread those puppies out. It's nice and flat. Keep moving it, bring it down, hold it flat, and I super glued it to my granite block. I hope I didn't. I haven't. It's a joke. I haven't. Well, I hope not. Okay, hopefully that's pretty good. I think the test is going to be if it rolls straight, then we're good. If it doesn't, like, you know, if it makes an arc, then it's not centered. I think we just about got it. So I don't have the right size transfer punches, so I'm just going to use the right size drill. Transfer that through. Just a little peck there. 5 holes. That mark should come through. Not amazing accuracy, but hopefully it'll do the job. That super glue is strong. Damn it. Fire. This is a little optical center punch here. You have a little doodah that you look through, you hold it, and you put that down, and you miss. Big time. And I found my mark, finally. Line her up right in the middle there. Then I'll go on that little mark and... Right, I used this wiggler to establish the center line of the spindle here. We're right on one of our center punch marks. We are going to drill it and then countersink it. We have 5 holes to do. 3 of them require countersinks. 2 of them do not require countersinks. Here we go! I'm pretty happy with that. That's that little cold oxide finish there. A little bit of bluing. Looks beautiful. That little extra step is means that even though this is going to be inside a collet chuck, I'm really going to have great fond memories of this project. Aside from one thing. Okay, it's really not that much of an issue. I think that we can solve this. I've got this here in my lathe. This is what the collet chuck assembly bolts onto. And if you have a look here, I've got a 2-micron DTI on it. And we're reading about 16 microns or so. What is 16 microns? It's like 5/10 So it's 1/1000th of an inch. So naturally that's probably a problem because that collet chuck itself gets bolted onto this, and if this isn't square, surely the collet isn't going to end up square. The other problem is like, even if I was to assume, okay, maybe this thing was made fitted to the out of squareness of the collet chuck. I have no idea why that would be. It doesn't come into my head why they would manufacture a collet chuck and then not have it square. But even if it was fitted to the thing, I wasn't smart enough to take a scribe line of where this thing fitted up, so I wouldn't know the orientation anyway. So I've made a mark of my low point. We've got a high point right about there. Naturally, I could have installed this thing wrong. I tried to take every care possible to make sure there weren't any chips on it, but I could well have messed that up. So I'm going to remove it. I also blued it before I put it on, just to see where it was contacting, in case any of it transferred. Well, I sadly can't see a great deal of blue on the taper, and I worry that it's contacting at the rear before the taper. I do believe it needs to contact the taper instead of the bit behind it, so this might require a little work on it. So I'm going to try and clean it again, reinstall it, and see if the runout is the same. Give this a clean. Yeah, we're bang on. It is the exact same, so this is definitely out of square. So we do not have squareness this way and that way to the spindle. Now I'm going to see about this little inside lip here, as that is what indexes on the collet chuck itself in squareness this way and that way, as this needs to be very much concentric to the rotation of the spindle. So what's interesting is now here I am low and here I am high. Obviously, and that's in concentricity to the spindle. And that is the complete opposite to our squareness, where this is out more. Oh, wait! So as I now try and evaluate what's happening here, let's think of it this way. This is our low spot in squareness to the spindle. This is also our high spot in terms of concentricity to the spindle. So it's the eccentric of that, or it's the high spot of that eccentric. We come round 180 degrees. Here is our high spot this way and that way, and here is our low spot this way and that way. Now, I think this may not be an issue with that backing plate, but rather an issue of how it's contacting the lathe. I have a sneaking suspicion that it's contacting not on the taper, but rather on the end of the threads instead of the taper. We're going to pull it off. We're going to have a look if that blue transferred. Hopefully it does. And has it? I have no idea. We definitely got a little bit of blue on the taper this time, a lot more at the top of the taper than at the bottom. But my theory may be incorrect, as I don't think I see any on the back there. Now, it's pretty dirty in there. It is not the nicest thing in the world, and I've occasionally got in there and tried to have a little bit of a clean, but I never really did a full job in it. You see there's a lot of kind of corrosion back there. And there was some gunk that I just got in there with a pick and scraped away. And I set this up and then looked at the backing plate itself, and it's out of squareness. And I've determined that if this theory is true, that it's indeed canted out like this, it's canted out over here. Now you see we have got some heavy bluing there, and we also have some kind of pretty decent surface roughness there, where it looks like somebody banged into it. We've also got a little bit on that side of the key, and I can really feel it when I rub my fingers over it. It's super subtle, but I wonder if I might just not try to kind of clean that out a little bit. It's been a good while since I checked in. I went in and out with the chuck a few more times. I made sure it was all clean. I did some more cycles with the Dicom, had a look at it, indicated it all again, just checked indeed that everything I thought about this was correct, and made sure to, redo it enough that, yeah, where I thought this was off, it is off. This thing is not concentric to my spindle. I also took this thing and put it on the granite, and I set up an indicator and indicated it and double checked it. Yes, it's all off. I also took this and I blued on it and I stoned the high spots. There were some little raised bits on it from when I had to bash it around to get the thing apart. I then took all the hardware and I had it soaked in some acetone for a while to degrease. I then polished it all up with some Scotch-Brite and some WD-40, get rid of the rust, get it ready to go back together. Because here's what I think needs to be the next step. I needed to reassemble this, put all the screws that I had in it back in with the new part as well, and then I'm going to put this assembly onto the backing plate, and we're just going to indicate it and make sure that this is indeed driven off square by the outer square backing plate. And if, when I look at the indicator readings, it looks the exact same way, or it looks like an exaggeration, or it looks as if the out of squareness of the backing plate is making this out of square, I'll then take it off. I'm going to turn this backing plate down. We'll put this back on and then indicate it back into concentricity, and hopefully that'll work. clean this off, clean the daylights out of this. Now these here are very, like, I mean, it's tightened to the lightest fingertip touch there, just so it stays on. And now I'm gonna put my indicator on it. Here's my high point. Ah, look at that! And it's pretty damn close to the high point on this. My low point, like 1.5 inches away from my low point on this. Okay. Okay, so I've now got it out here on the end, and like we are way off and perfectly off in line with how this is off center. So like, it's exaggerating it. Obviously, we're projecting out the error, and so out here we're off like 0.02 of an inch, which is really obviously rather bad here. I'm now gonna go into the inside of the bore of the collet chuck here, and we're gonna see what that looks like. So here is my high spot, and here is my low spot. And now I'm gonna check the squareness. Here is my high, and here is my low. Just so you're aware of what I'm seeing here, look at all of that. That's some serious out of squareness, like that's appalling. So that was with everything pretty loose. What I'm now gonna do is I'm going to now tighten up the bolts a pretty decent degree more. And now I'm gonna check all of what I saw and make sure it's all the same. High, low, high, low, high. Okay, not ideal. So that's interesting, that's opposite. Well, I think you probably worked out the decision I've made. So far from touching it, I have taken off 0.02 of a millimeter. So this is just the lightest skim. You know, it's less than 1,000th of an inch. Now 0.03 of a millimeter. Now 0.05 of a millimeter. Right, so that's 0.05 of a millimeter. I still have some Sharpie mark right here. So I'm gonna go to, I think we'll get it on the next 100th of a mil. So we're gonna take one more pass. 0.06 of a millimeter. Now let's have a look. No Sharpie. Looks beautiful. This is actually the first time I've machined a cast iron. So this is really exciting. Isn't it amazing? Get excited by just turning a new material. I don't need to deburr or anything. Right, so now, here, this is the scary bit. I'm just gonna touch this. I'm just gonna touch it. Just ever so slightly. I mean, I'm trying to take like less than 100th of a mil. I just want to take the slightest bit off this diameter here, because that's going to set our concentricity for our collet chuck. But I don't want to remove too much, otherwise there's going to be too much slop in the collet chuck. So here goes nothing. So that is the lightest touch, just skimming the surface. And you can see here, there's all Sharpie, and here we've been touching it. That's the amount of out of whackness that this bad boy is. Let's do it again. Right, so I've now gone in 0.06 of a millimeter, and finally, it was that last 100th that was needed, and we've got the bulk of the Sharpie off there. This is now concentric to the spindle, and I'm now happy to put something on there, I reckon. And we're gonna see if we can at least indicate it into squareness. Real fast though, because I can. Just face across there. Right, so I've got the edge of the taper in the bore there dialed in to, depending on how you look at it, it's about 1/10 of a 1,000th. The best way I've found to do this has been to wait for the high spot and then hit it the opposite side. So after an unbelievable amount of time finicking with this thing, right at the edge of a grand piece of stock, held in a collet in the collet truck here, we're getting 1.5 of a 1,000th of an inch. That's 0.004 of a millimeter of indicated run out. And I was thinking for a while there what I'd have to do is I'd take off the chuck again, take the tiniest skim off the diameter of the flange, and then re-indicate that chuck in to get it all the way down to 0. Then I was looking at some forums, trying to find out what's an acceptable amount of run out for a collet chuck. And I saw one of the posts was saying, your spindle's gonna have a little bit of play in it. And while reading the responses to somebody else asking about it, seems that 1.5 tenths for this old machine probably isn't too bad. It also got me to thinking, what is the actual slop when you apply pressure on this thing? i.e., could there be enough slop in the spindle, though the spindle was indicated to be pretty bang smack on, is there enough slop in the spindle to mean that this weight is shifting it as it goes around? And then I got on this thing and I put, like, I don't know, 20 pounds of pressure back and forth, maybe a little bit more. I reefed on it a little bit, and of course, then all of a sudden, you know, the 4 thousandths of a millimeter that I was concerned about really seemed like nothing in comparison to just how much that spindle can move when it's under pressure. This is an old lathe that's probably had a fairly hard life, so I'm happy with 1.5 tenths, about 4 thousandths of a millimeter. Though what I do want to do is I want to be able to eventually check that this is square to the spindle, but I only have about 2 inches of ground stock in this entire workshop that I can trust. And of course, you know, that was me using an end mill here in the collet. But for sure, I know right now that over these 2 inches here, I've got pretty good concentricity. This project has been unbelievably fun. Working and tinkering away at this over the past few days has been a total blast. I want to thank you so much for coming along with this video. I hope you enjoyed it, because I really have. There's one issue though, is I had to use a screwdriver to turn the collet chuck. In tomorrow's episode, I am going to make some lathe chuck handles, so make sure that you subscribe so you can see that. It's going to be a lot of fun making more tools for the workshop. Very satisfying. Hope you're getting out to your workshops and making stuff, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.